Settle in because you're in for a fantastic day today, and we're happy that we're here to kick things off. My name is Catherine Hauser. I'm an anchor reporter with News 8, which is right around the corner. We are so lucky to have Yale in our backyard and for Yale to take on the second leadership series of the Made event. The first one was last month, and if you missed it, it was wildly successful, but we are so glad that you're here for the second. And this is Made Innovation, where today the focus is going to be on innovation in our state. And after the energy and momentum of the first Talent Made that we had last month, we're really keeping the conversation moving and going, and we're at the heart of Connecticut's innovation ecosystem, and that's at the Yale Innovation Summit. So what is innovation to you? It could mean a lot of things. For me, it's a willingness to disrupt the norm, to think outside the box, to find new ways to do things, to build things with an eye on the future. That's how I define it, and maybe that would be different for you. Connecticut, I love facts, right? The news, we love facts. Connecticut is known for its advanced manufacturing, aircraft, engines, helicopters, submarines. We have well over 4,400 manufacturers. We've made breakthrough fabrications, products, have more than 17,000 bioscience workers at more than 500 companies, and Connecticut is a world leader in aerospace manufacturing and shipbuilding. So there's a lot to learn and discuss here, and I feel like I'm only scratching the surface. Throughout today's event, this panel discussion, a quick reminder, and I'm going to have the lovely Anthony switch the slide here for us. We want this to be interactive for you. There's going to be some very interesting conversations. If you have a question, you can ask it. All you have to do is get to the Made Events group on LinkedIn, on your own LinkedIn page, and you can ask a question. So if you have anything that you're thinking about, we're going to have a live Q&A session at the end of the panel, and I may read your questions so you can get that answered, but the conversation will continue beyond just today. And just a quick recap of what Made is all about. This is a leadership series, and ideally this is to connect ideas, people, and resources that drive economic opportunity in Connecticut. That is the focus of what we're doing. And it's not just about inspiration, it is about real, practical takeaways as well. So today we're going to explore how business, no matter the size or industry, can innovate. And you're going to hear from leaders today, our lovely panel, leaders in biotech, quantum, AI, and the lessons that they apply far beyond the lab. So to frame today's conversation, which we're so excited about and so glad to have you here with us, we're joined by somebody who is driving strategy and innovation at the highest levels of the state government. So please welcome the Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development and Connecticut's Chief Innovation Officer, Dan O'Keefe, our keynote speaker.
Thank you. All right, I want to start today's conversation by apologizing to our panel. This is not my best angle, and they're about to stare at it for about 10 minutes. But I am incredibly excited to be here. This is our second Made. Out of curiosity, how many folks, show of hand, were at the first Made? So not many, and that's actually great. Thank you for coming again. Prepare to be disappointed a second time with my remarks, but I think that's really exciting that there's a big group of new folks here actually hearing what we're trying to do for the first time. Again, I'm going to spend about 10 minutes just talking about our economy, kind of the trends that we're seeing, what I'm excited about. I want to talk about our innovation economy, some of the things that we're trying to do to really create a culture and an ecosystem to support the innovation economy throughout the state of Connecticut. And then I'll close by talking about some of our challenges. We do have some challenges that we'll continue to work through. These are hard challenges, and we need your help in working through them. Then we'll move to the panel, where we're going to talk to a practitioner, someone who has started and created a billion-dollar company here in the state of Connecticut. We're going to talk to a consortia working between Yale and UConn and the state of Connecticut, trying to really apply quantum in the state of Connecticut. And we're going to talk to someone building for the industry, a real biotech cluster here in Connecticut generally, but also in New Haven specifically. So first, a little bit about our economy. For those that have lived here for a long time, if you don't live here, I invite you to move here. It's incredible, I promise you. But for those who've been here for a long time, you know we went through a period that was challenged. The 10 years post-global financial crisis, 2008 to 2018 was a brutal decade for the state of Connecticut. Our economy got smaller, population was declining, things were not good. And then we had a global pandemic, an externality none of us wanted or predicted, which also slammed our economy, but also all economies incredibly hard. Since then, something really interesting has happened. We saw an acceleration in our economy, the likes of which we have not seen in 20 years. That has sustained. That was not just a 2021 phenomenon. It has sustained until now. Our economy has been the 17th fastest growing economy in the United States over the last 3 years. To put that in context, we were the 49th worst performing economy in terms of GDP growth prior to the pandemic. So it gives you a sense of how the economy shifted pretty dramatically. We also saw population trends reaccelerate. So from the declines I was talking about to now 4 years of consistent population growth. Why that matters is that's people voting with their feet. They're seeing this. I can sell, but I can't sell 3.6 million people on an incredible thing. They're seeing it with their own eyes, and they're moving here. We're the only state in the region who has seen their population go up each of the last 4 years. Again, just kind of gives you a sense for how those trends have accelerated and sustained. So what happened? A $350 billion economy doesn't just change on a nail like that. What I think actually changed, what I think happened, was the pandemic rewrote certain economic rules. There's more flexibility now with where to live. You don't necessarily have to locate yourself within X miles of some glass box somewhere. And with that flexibility, we're seeing more people choose quality of life, quality of education, quality of healthcare, all the soft and fluffy reasons that I moved my family here in 2011, but now have become economic comparative advantage. So if you're not here, please move here. And if you're sitting next to somebody who lives here, ask them about it. It's incredible. Now let's talk about the innovation economy. Connecticut is a home of innovation and has been for over 100 years. The submarine was invented here. The first nuclear submarine was delivered here. We have photolithography machines. Again, show of hands. Who knows what a photolithography machine is? Show me my fellow nerds. That's actually a lot of fellow nerds. Photolithography machines are the machines that make semiconductors. ASML, the worldwide leader, 100% market share, their North American headquarters is here in Wilton, Connecticut. We make jet engines here. We make incredibly complicated machines, and that's a 100-plus year history of advanced manufacturing. We are a prolific generator of IP, one of the highest per capita rates of patent production in the United States. So innovation here happens all over the place, not just the small companies, but also the large companies innovating every day. The Lamont administration, the administration I humbly work for, we are working incredibly hard to support that growth. We've announced a $100 million program called Innovation Clusters. This is a program focused on the application of these next generation technologies in our most strategic industries, things like healthcare and biotech, things like finance and insurance, things like advanced manufacturing in support of our national defense. We've announced Quantum CT, which we're going to talk more about today. Al, who's with us, is the CEO of Quantum CT. Quantum CT is the first-time collaboration between Yale and UConn. Think about that for a second. Our two R1 research institutes have never collaborated before, but now they are. They're seeing the same trends that I'm seeing and are excited to work together to really start to drive our economy forward. And by the way, I want to take a moment sitting here at Yale to really thank Yale for that support and their partnership. Yale is investing over $1.5 billion in their tech campus here. We all just drove through it. It was chaos. It was mayhem. I was almost late. I think I almost gave Anthony a heart attack, but we made it. Thank you to Jess for being my quick tour guide to get me through all the construction. But that's an incredible investment in the future of Connecticut. So I do want to thank Yale for that support. Lastly, I'll just close with some of our challenges, but don't worry, we won't close on a low note. We're going to get to our panel, which will be all the high notes. We do have challenges that we continue to work through. The first is, let's face it, the federal government has become a little bit harder to predict. I think that's a diplomatic way to say it. With that lack of prediction gets introduced to a market, you start to see hesitancy in investment. Consumers start to slow down their spending. They get more defensive. Businesses defer investment. Businesses don't like to invest in a less than predictable environment. We're seeing government spending get cut. That's quite public. And now net exports under pressure because of rising protectionism. What I just described, consumer spending, business investment, government spending, and net exports, that's GDP. That's our economy. So I am concerned about this year. I am mostly concerned because I think it's just punching ourselves in the face. I think it's completely unnecessary and self-inflicted. But I hope to see continued moderation in what we're seeing now and some of that isolationist rhetoric. And my hope is that the economy continues to perform the way it has been. Energy is our largest challenge, in my view. Our industrial energy prices are 117% higher than the rest of the United States. That is not a Connecticut problem. That is a regional problem. We're part of a regional grid. The solutions are incredibly challenging. They're politically difficult. But again, I am deeply optimistic that we have a governor and we have an alignment to really trying to get that problem solved. But the problems won't be easy. And the last I'll mention is just workforce and housing. The good news is our population is growing. Bad news is we've got a sustained gap of the number of jobs available versus those willing to fill them. That has been around 70 to 90,000 job opportunities that go unfilled. And so we need to continue to produce the workforce of our future. That's a big part of what we're doing with our collaboration with Yale and UConn. And then in housing, look, again, the good news is we've got people moving here, but we've got to find places to put them. Because we went through that lost decade, we saw the amount of net housing starts decelerate. It's now reaccelerating, so the good news is we're starting to move the needle, but that is a problem that has been a long-standing problem that we continue to work on to try and address. All right, with that, I will shut up. I will make them stop staring at this angle, and we'll move now to our panel. And I'm going to kick off the panel by just first asking each of you to just introduce yourselves very briefly and talk a little bit about your backgrounds. Please.
Thank you, Commissioner, for inviting me here today, and Yale for hosting this great event. My name is Vlad Korik. I am currently the CEO and chairman of Biohaven, located right here in New Haven, Connecticut on Church Street. As the commissioner was saying, this state offers so much to so many industries, and in many ways, I am the product of a lot of the opportunity that is born in Connecticut. So I was raised and born here and graduated from the University of Connecticut, where I focused on neurobiology research, and that was the beginning of my research career at our public university. And then benefited from an experience at Yale, where I did my internship, residency, and fellowship, and then was on faculty running a neuroscience research unit. And the research unit was a collaboration between the state of Connecticut and Yale as well, highlighting the importance of that collaboration. And then I went into the pharmaceutical industry to learn drug development, which is another legacy industry in the state of Connecticut. And that all served as the backdrop for me founding Biohaven, which was a startup literally from my spare bedroom, from a few startup funds to a sale to Pfizer for $13 billion a couple years ago.
Sorry, how much?
$13 billion, and then a spin out again after that to a next startup. We're not quite to 13 yet, but we're around the 2 billion level, and we'll get there and beyond. And thank you for having me here today.
Jody.
Good morning. I'm Jody Gillen. I'm the CEO of BioCT. Honored to be here this morning. BioCT is the life science trade organization for the state of Connecticut. So it's all encompassing of life sciences, AI, quantum, biotech, pharma. So don't be fooled by the name bio and BioCT. We're a not-for-profit. We're made up of about 250 member organizations. And our mission is to grow and catalyze and promote the industry in the state of Connecticut. So I'm an epidemiologist by training. I come from New York City. I'm one of the COVID exodus folks that came from New York, doing a summer rental, fell in love with the lifestyle here, and it's been a good 5 years that I made Connecticut my permanent home. And I spent a good 27 years in industry, both large pharma and then startup biotech, and my last company was an AI startup. So I bring all that to BioCT, and we have 4 main priorities. The first is policy, the second is people and workforce, the third is promotion, so that's our member organizations in the state overall, and our last P is places. So we actually own and operate incubators around the state, and then we have our hands involved in the innovation clusters that we'll probably hear more about. So thank you.
Al?
Yes, hi, I'm Albert Green. I'm the president and CEO of Quantum CT. So I'm new to the state, so I'm one of the people that have decided to pick up and to move here, and delighted with what I've been seeing. And this summit's really exciting to be a part of. Quantum CT is really about building this ecosystem. We see this incredibly exciting technology, quantum technology. You hear about it in the news, quantum computing. We're really about building that ecosystem for the state of Connecticut. I like to talk about our ABCs, and our ABCs, we're about being agile, we're about being bold, and we're about being collaborative. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we proceed on the panel. My background, I'm a physicist by training, but I've spent my career essentially at this interface between cutting edge, deep tech, and business execution, hardcore business, P&L execution, and strategy. And so quantum right now is an exciting area for someone like me as a trained physicist to really see what the great promise of this new technology.
Awesome. Thank you. So now is incredibly clear that I am the least intelligent person on this panel. When they say things that I don't understand, I will try to translate and put them in layman's terms. But we'll start with something that I really do understand, which is I want to talk about the environment for building a business in the state of Connecticut. So I'm going to start with Vlad, talking a little bit about the challenges you had at the early stages, access to capital, finding the right talent, the regulatory regime, just things that you think states can do to really create the environment where businesses can thrive from startup to roughly $13 billion.
Great question, and you almost give me PTSD with the list of all those challenges and issues that I had to maneuver as an entrepreneur. In my field, in some ways, I was particularly in a good situation because Connecticut has this legacy of healthcare innovation, right? And when you look at what's come out of this state, there's very few states who can brag about the number of drugs that have come from the state. When you look at Pfizer, where we have blockbuster drugs like Zoloft and Xeljanz and Zithromax, and the list goes on and on and on. And the COVID vaccine, that's the backdrop of this kind of healthcare ecosystem. And then more recently, Solaris at Alexion, SpringWorks with Gofelki, Biohaven with Nurtec. So in this state has the talent pool, it has the traditional expertise in drug development, and then the other kind of important pillar is the educational, academic, clinical mission of Yale University and UConn. And so it was really in that backdrop that, for me, my entrepreneurial story, started with Biohaven, and there was a big opportunity. Catherine started the session by talking about what does innovation mean for you. Well, for me, innovation is not just disrupting, but it's actually solving big patient problems and healthcare problems, right? And so I had this background in neuroscience. I saw there was a major problem. I think everyone in this room would agree our current treatments for neuropsychiatric and neurologic disorders are still inadequate, right? There's a big unmet need, there. And so it was in that backdrop that I started, Biohaven from startup. And it was challenging, Commissioner. I don't want to underestimate it. There were some dark days of not knowing, would you overcome, the challenges. Access to capital is always a challenge for every company. Thankfully, here in Connecticut, there are a number of funds and obviously Connecticut Innovation serving as the initial seed funding for those type of ventures. But it wasn't an easy situation. But entrepreneurs overcome challenges. They find paths forward, and that's what we did at Biohaven, to the point we have an approved drug that's helping millions of people that originated here from this ecosystem, and now is part of the legacy of our state and the impact that we've had on healthcare.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. By the way, Connecticut Innovations, which Vlad just mentioned, folks don't know what that is, the state's venture capital fund. It's been around for over 30 years, incredibly successful. Our chairman, Michael Cantor, is here. Our CEO, Matt McCooey, might be in the audience somewhere. Very proud of CI's legacy and partnering with early stage companies in the state of Connecticut. Jody, let's talk about the industry. So you represent the industry's interests. I think you also spend a lot of time looking at how the state of Connecticut supports the biopharma industry as it compares to other states. And maybe give us a sense of the same question, building a business in the state of Connecticut, what can the state do more to support the industry? What has the state done in support of the industry?
Yeah, so in terms of support, I think we're very fortunate in the state of Connecticut. We have access. We have access to people. I think of Connecticut like a village, and I think I saw John Bordeaux in the room, and he calls it the one phone call state. So I could text you, the commissioner, and you'll text back at 11 p.m. And I haven't seen that anywhere else. So I think it's that village mentality of access and support that I've never seen in any other state or any other country. And I've seen two trajectories for companies coming out of Connecticut. Either they're being spun out of Yale or UConn, and we could see under Josh Gabal and Yale Ventures, we're spinning out more companies than I can even keep track of, which is great. I think when we're trying to lure companies here, what I love about Connecticut is we all band together to really lure the companies. So we could get together with Yale, with the state, with Connecticut Innovations, and all different groups and really put on a good show. Where I think our challenge is, it's around some fiscal policies. And I think that's where we need to get more competitive, because we have access to talent. We have over 600 miles of coastline and a great lifestyle here. But as things get more challenging with, headwinds on the federal level and even the state level, companies are making purely fiscal decisions. So right now, we're still in an active legislative session. We need to get that R&D tax credit from 65 to 90%. We need to eliminate the capital tax, and not in 2028, but ideally now or no later than 2026. Because companies, it's not even that they're getting lured to Massachusetts or New York any longer. It's about Texas, North Carolina, where the fiscal laws are providing an incentive. And when companies' lifelines are being cut because of federal headwinds, they're making fiscal decisions.
By the way, I do want to amplify one point Jody just made, getting our tax credit for R&D in the biotech sector from 65 to 90. That idea came from a breakfast she hosted that I attended over a year ago. Someone asked the question, why aren't we competitive with Massachusetts? And I, as a brand new person in public service, said, I had no idea we were not, but we will get that fixed. Within 1 year, it was in the governor's proposed budget. We have one more week to go, but I just think it's an example of that feedback loop. Really help industries and companies helping public servants understand where we're competitive and where we're not. And I promise you, folks like me are here to help solve those problems. So I'm glad we're at least getting that one addressed. Al, I'm going to go to you, and we're going to talk about quantum in a minute. But first, I actually just want to talk about starting a company, because you're a startup. Al, I will tell you, Al had to put his own money into the bank account to get it started because we didn't yet have an entity formed. When Al joined as CEO, we were still in the process of actually forming the entity of Quantum CT. We'll get there. We are getting there. But I want to hear what it's been like for you as someone coming into the state for the first time and really actually starting a business, which is effectively what you've done. Where did you see opportunities? Where did you see support? Where did you see challenges?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. I mean, it's interesting to see. I mean, I'm going to make comments sort of an outsider and very new to your ecosystem. I'm coming here actually from Northeast Ohio, so that's outside of Cleveland. Very, very different ecosystem. One of the things that struck me today, even when I was here at the summit, this is my first summit, and I think it's a great advantage for the state of Connecticut, is that the comment was made sort of a one phone call state, and the way I see it here is that the distance, not just physical distance, but the distance between the anchor corporations and the thought leadership is small. And I'm just walking around the building. I've been a part of higher ed, and I've started and I've run companies before coming here, and that's not that common, to be honest. And the reason why that's super important is because, particularly when you're a newco or a new company, typically your first customers are the anchor corporations, and you need to be in an ecosystem where the anchor corporations are open to the risks associated with newcos and investing in newcos and being early adopters and so on and so forth. And so that's one point I would make. The second point I would make is the workforce and the value of thought leadership. You all, the comment was made of, you're world class to world class R1 institutions, not to mention the rest of the state college system and the community college system. I mean, it's a highly educated workforce from what I can see up to now, and the ability to harness that kind of talent is critical. And I know we're not going to talk about quantum yet, but quantum is one of these game-changing revolutions, I would say. And to do that, you need an educated workforce. You need a workforce that's going to be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things, and that's what you need, an educated workforce for that.
Couldn't agree more. And by the way, we are going to talk about quantum, and just so you're ready, I'm going to ask you to explain to the group in layman's terms what quantum is and why it matters for the industry here in Connecticut. But before we go there, I wanted to talk about the concept of location and clustering. We're sitting here in New Haven, Connecticut, which has emerged as our sort of biopharma cluster. It is part of a broader cluster between us and a state to the north where I was born, but will go not mentioned. And I'm just curious to hear how much you think in modern times, now with the emergence of hybrid and virtual working, does physical co-location matter? Does it drive innovation the way it used to? Just give me a sense, and I'll start with you, Vlad, what you've seen prior to the pandemic, in the beginnings of your entrepreneurial journey versus now. Does clustering still matter? Does co-location still matter?
Yeah, great question. Clustering actually is critical to the overall mission and growth of a company, because you have to have access to that talent pool. And as we talked about, the intellectual property of universities like Yale and UConn. But you're right, the pandemic has changed all the rules. Like, there's no doubt about it. It has actually helped companies like ourselves, like a small, what I like to say, modern day pharma company. When we started Biohaven, we got to rewrite the rules and said, how are we going to compete against large pharma, where that was really hard to do before, right? Now that we have technology like Zoom, remote working, guess what? We don't have to, grow a big company under one big infrastructure, here in New Haven. We can have people living throughout the state, throughout the region, and we can use that technology to be, I think, a little mightier than our size. And then you can use that technology to outcompete with the larger companies. And so we're able to use social media with the work we did with Khloe Kardashian and others to reach patients where a small company like us, couldn't launch a drug, on our own. And when you look at a company of a few hundred people being able to get to the type of valuations that we had, it was really because of technology and how the rules have changed. So I think COVID actually, benefited Biohaven in many ways, in that it forced us to modernize pharma. And pharma needs to be modernized. You need to be more efficient, and doing things in a conservative, old-fashioned way maybe was good prior to the pandemic, but after that, it really allowed us to bring drug development to a different, efficient level. How many times do you hear about a pharma company starting out of a spare bedroom? Like, literally, we were able to do that because of this ecosystem, this clustering, but then also technology that allowed us to expand our footprint.
So let me popcorn this around a little bit. I'm going to go a different order. So Al, I'm going to go to you. And actually, what I'd love to hear you talk about is how you'd compare that concept of clustering, what you've seen here versus what you've seen in your previous states, your previous ventures. What were some of the differences, strengths, weaknesses in terms of how much you saw co-location of resources as opposed to the sort of diffusing of resources?
Yeah. So I am a big fan of place-based initiatives, of which Quantum CT is one. I have said that, and I'm a strong believer I think innovation happens at the boundaries. Gone are the days when you have, a single scientist tucked away in a back laboratory, coming up with world-changing ideas. It does happen, but it doesn't happen that much. And the fact of the matter is, the breakthroughs happen when you combine thought leadership in physics and thought leadership in biotech, which is a big overlap area, biophysics. That's where the big breakthroughs happen. And so when you can engineer as many collisions as possible, that's what leads to these breakthrough inventions and so on. I'll just tell a quick story. I remember one time, I've had the privilege of being a part of a lot of inventions. And I remember sitting at a bar in Taiwan and just talking about a bunch of stuff. And another person and I, we came up with an invention that led to a bunch of products. And it was that doesn't happen on a Zoom call. It really takes time for ideas to marinate and to put people together from a variety of different disciplines, a variety of different backgrounds that are approaching problems in very different ways that leads to these kinds of real breakthroughs.
So when Al started his story at a bar in Taiwan, I didn't know where that was going to go. I'm glad it went towards new products. Jody, I joked about our neighbor to the north, but because I'm a competitive person. But the reality is we are a participant. We're all Americans, and we're a participant in a broader ecosystem here of innovation in the biotech sector. Can you talk a little bit about that broader cluster and what you're seeing in terms of collaboration across borders?
Yeah, I mean, the borders are permeable, right? So we have talent in Connecticut, going up and down and working in other states and vice versa. I think overall, the collaboration is wonderful. If I think about my partners in the other bios, we talk about regional events. We have the big bio summit coming up in Massachusetts in June. We leverage Mass Bio's co-op program for our startups to get discounts like 50% off Thermo Fisher lab supplies. We leverage their education and we do other events. But I would say the more it gets challenging on the federal level and the state level, we're starting to feel a little bit of competition and a little bit of pull. Where we start seeing other states trying to lure some of our companies out and do the whole dog and pony show. And then we'll go into some of our companies and they'll say, well, I met with New York and they came up with this spreadsheet and they'll give us this and they'll give us that. So, it does get a little bit more challenging, but I think so far, not only have we been able to maintain our companies, they're growing here and we're constantly able to lure new companies. I do think perception becomes reality, and sometimes I joke that we're the best kept secret in life sciences. So we do a lot of work together to make sure that we're promoting how catalyzed Connecticut is. Advanced CT just put out a new report in life sciences. We have over 1,500 companies in life sciences. So we need to, I see Anthony put this together. We need to work together to make sure that everyone knows that globally. And I just want to comment, because I don't think Al knows this, but on Friday night we were texting with Carter Winstanley, the developer of 101, and the city of New Haven. So we're trying to get Quantum CT co-located with BioCT in New Haven. And I just want to comment on the clustering too really briefly, because we cover the entire state of Connecticut. And I've been at this now for 2 years. And when I inherited BioCT, we didn't have a physical office. We have incubators around the state. So I gave it 6 months to see where I spent the majority of my time. And I realized that 90% of my time was in New Haven. And that's when I decided we had to have a headquarters in New Haven. So we have an office in Biolabs. We're right next to Biohaven across from Yale Ventures. And there are days when I go in and I just can't even get to my computer because there's so many conversations in the kitchen. And that's my ideal day. And I think that's the benefit of co-location.
And by the way, as translation engine, when Jody refers to 101, just for the folks who aren't from around here, that's one of our incredible biotech buildings, which I encourage you to walk by and gander at it in all of its glory. All right, we're going to move now to technology and innovation. And by the way, after this, we're going to move to Q&A. So if folks want to start thinking about questions they might have for our panel, we're going to move to that next. But before we do, let's really talk about innovation. And Al has forewarned, I first want to talk about quantum, and in particular, the commercial application of quantum. Where you think, and by the way, quantum is sort of TBD in terms of its broad commercial application. Bill Gates has predicted it's within 5 years, which feels optimistic to me, but I'll take it. But maybe talk about, when it arrives, and it's a when, not if, what you think its application will be. How can it help change and really drive the industry of biotech and drug discovery forward?
Well, you promised to put me on the spot, so let me try this. I'm sorry. Every time I get asked this question about what is quantum technology, I try something new. So I'm going to try a new one on you all. So if you, let's take a quick...
Dumb it down, Al. I went to Brown.
Okay. So take a quick trip down memory lane. So, in the 20th century, physicists really began to understand at a very fundamental nature how nature behaves. And that understanding really led to things like the transistor, right, in the 1950s. And that transistor led to the thing that's in your pocket that everyone uses every day, like your phones and your monitors and your displays and the speakers that we're on. I mean, everything really drove us or came out of this basic understanding of how nature behaves. So then we fast forward to now, okay, and while we understand very well, very deeply how nature behaves, we've exploited it and computed it. We've used it to compute things in very sort of classical ways, ones and zeros and so on. And quantum computing really is about using nature to compute the way nature behaves. And I know that's a little bit of a convoluted statement, but it turns out that when you do that, it leads to all kinds of breakthroughs in the kinds of things that you can do, because nature is very good at doing very complicated things. And so quantum computing and quantum technology is really harnessing what nature does naturally very, very well. So that's my brief explanation of quantum technology. So then if you look at the kinds of applications, okay, so it turns out that a lot of the early applications that we see are applications that the state of Connecticut seems to be a thought leader in. Areas like fintech, areas like biotech, areas like advanced materials design and defense, and in really complex systems. And so one of the things that we want to do at Quantum CT is to bring those applications as close to the people that are developing the core uses of this quantum technology. So that's what we're really all about. Last thing I would say is that, when you hear quantum technology and so on, people think about quantum computing and things very important. But there's also a whole lot of other areas which touch on advanced sensors and advanced techniques for co-locating things and power generation and so on. So the thing about quantum technology is that we really don't know exactly what those breakthrough innovations are. The people that first invented the transistor, the thought was that the best use was going to be for hearing aids. Well, yeah, it's used for hearing aids, but it's used for your phone also. And so the idea here is to build an ecosystem where we can accelerate and find out what are those game-changing applications and really have those living here in the state of Connecticut.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to go to Vlad next, and I'm going to both make the question a little more specific and a little more general. On the more specific, let's talk about drug discovery. Let's talk about what some of these next generation technologies can mean for drug discovery. And then the more general, let's broaden it to include AI and other advanced data sciences, some of the other technologies that are broadly applicable, but how you're leveraging them specifically within drug discovery.
Yeah, there's no doubt AI and quantum are going to have profound effects on drug development. Right now, in the early days, they're really being used in areas like chemistry and optimizing compounds, and able to do high throughput screening and get to new novel compounds a lot earlier. But I think, as Al was saying, we want to leverage that to better understand the underlying natural processes that we don't fully understand. And so we have not yet seen the full effect of AI and quantum yet. We're going to see that, I think, in the next 10 years, because our knowledge of these systems aren't complete yet, right? And so we need additional work, like groups in town, Brex.org, which has a human a brain library, basically, where they're hooking up a brain to AI and trying to understand the basic physiologic natural mechanisms that we don't yet understand. And if we can tap into that, you can fantasize about how you could accelerate drug development by a decade or so by knowing whether maybe one or two experiments in a model like that might predict, are you hitting the target? What dose do you need? Is it safe? And are you going to change the course of the disease? So I think that's the future state that that we're working towards. Now, until we're there, there's a lot of opportunity, locally in this state to leverage, at Yale, for example, cutting edge chemistry technology, not, leveraging those type of technologies, but yet going to paradigm shift and change the field. So, for example, there's a technology from the Spiegel lab at Yale that we saw many years back where this chemist had this idea about, tricking your liver to remove disease-causing pathogens from your body. Like normally your liver removes things from your body. This Yale chemist came up with the idea, let's get your liver to do what it does every day to cure disease. And we're just treating the first patients with this, new technology. So I think in our field, Dan, we have to always keep our eye on technology. We have to live 5 years into the future. And we have to say, what technology are we ready to leverage in the next 3 to 5 years to change patient outcomes, and then also make the investments in quantum and AI that will be the next generation. So I think of it as kind of a several stage process, like what's ripe for application today to help patients and change paradigms, and then let's invest in the future and make sure we're fully leveraging the type of work that Al and his company are doing.
And Jody, what we're talking about is we are talking about the future, right? So it's not quite here yet. Now, I should comment, by the way, as we talk about quantum, the Quantum Institute at Yale was one of the very early pioneers. And we sit within a half mile of functioning quantum computers right now. So this isn't quite science fiction. It is here now. But again, we're talking about the commercial applicability, which is a little bit out. And when you start thinking about something that might be here within 5, 10 years, you've got to start talking about workforce. You've got to start talking about training the people who are going to be able to harness these technologies in the way Vlad and Al just described. Talk to us about how you think about the industry support for understanding where the workforce needs to be in 5, 10 years, and how we can all work together to make sure we're training that workforce of the future.
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous partnership between our academic institutions and all of them, not just Yale and UConn. I'm looking at Christine here from Southern. And we have some of the best programs. We have support from our industry partners. So we have the thought leadership. So we have folks at Biohaven, the PhDs, the MDs, lending their time with the students. What I think we need to do is do it more systematically. And we need to leverage technology. We're talking about these breakthroughs in quantum and AI. There's tremendous pressure at every organization to do things better, cheaper, faster. I do think we have all the raw ingredients. I think we just have to do it as efficiently as possible. So if we look at some of the downturns in biotech, and we see them in the news, and you have to ride the waves. The same day that we saw some layoffs, I think you got $600 million in financing. So congratulations. So, we have to make sure that we're keeping the talent in Connecticut. We have an incredibly well-trained workforce. We have to keep all our students here too. We have a life science sprints program run by the New Haven Chamber of Commerce that puts interns across companies in the state of Connecticut, giving them experience across virtually every company in life sciences with programming that kicks off June 10th. So we have to make sure, usually if students have an internship in the state, they're more likely to stay after graduation and have a job. So I think it's one about programming for the future in our academic institutions, making sure that we partner with our industry partners, and then through internships, but then also become more efficient, leverage technology so we have a system-wide database to keep, all the talent in the state here. Because when one company goes down for a period of time, another's coming up. So the goal is let's all partner together. So I'm going to make a plug really quickly that BioCT has advanced its career portal. So it's not only jobs on our career portal, we now actually have all talent resumes. So I urge anyone hiring, please keep the talent here that from companies that have had the downturn for the meantime.
Couldn't agree more. You're doing my job for me, which I appreciate. I'm glad I responded to your text at 11 p.m. One quick thing. I'm going to ask it quickly, even though it could be a complex question. It just occurs to me that we haven't talked about the regulatory component, and it would be a failure of the moderator to not at least push us a little bit on that. Is the regulatory regime here in Connecticut, do you consider it to be accommodating? Clearly, we got to balance accommodating innovation and risk-taking, but also safety and efficacy. And I'd just be curious to hear where you think we are on that balance, and even if that is the right balance. And I'll open up to all three of you, whoever you think might be comfortable responding to that.
So I was forced to become a lobbyist. I'm probably the most reluctant lobbyist. I have to say what I love most about Connecticut is actually the access and partnership to the state and our legislators. Sometimes they do propose things that, initially we're like, whoa, certain legislation, but then that's never going to be the legislation that's final and approved. So I think they look to us and partner with us, take even line edits from our legislative affairs subcommittee, and really partner to get it right. So I think the intent is there where it's not easy to balance protecting patients and every resident in the state of Connecticut without stifling innovation and business. And the commissioner gets it right, the governor gets it right, but I know that sometimes you have your hands tied and some challenges, but I think our legislators are listening.
Dan, maybe I'll just add, I think, from a state level, in our industry, we don't see a lot of barriers. In fact, everyone in the state has been very helpful and supportive to advancing healthcare innovation because of, I think, our history. I think it's more on the federal level that we really need to focus on regulations, and we need our state leaders to help advocate on the federal level. Drug development takes way too long to get drugs to patients. I don't think the FDA has truly been modernized in about 40 years, and there's so many more efficiencies that we have to bring to that regulation that I'm hopeful that will happen. But from a state level, I think everyone here is doing the right thing. I could use your support for continued advocacy on the federal level, and we have to push that. And look, drugs have to be safely developed, no doubt about it. But when patients are suffering today, to see recurrent delays and issues with regulatory barriers is not fair to our patients or science and innovation. You want to, as quick as possible, translate new findings to people who need it.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just quickly comment on the hands being tied, which they're never tied, I promise you. They're sometimes full. The way I'll say this is, do you guys remember that old video we watched as kids? Or I'm probably dating myself since most of you are younger than me. But When a Bill Becomes a Law? Everybody remember that? Okay, it's way more complex than that video ever suggested. What that video talks about is how bills that do become a law, but so much happens before that. And what happens is anyone can propose anything. And that's what Jody mentioned. And when that happens, you just get a lot of noise. What you really have to do is engage in the process. And you would be amazed at the process. Democracies are built to run slowly for a reason. We want to get this right. And I know almost every member of our legislature, and I promise you none of them are sitting around like rubbing their hands together wondering how they can grind drug discovery to a halt in the state of Connecticut. Well, maybe a couple are, but vast majority are not. But there's something that I've come to affectionately call the unintended amplification of legislative intent. What happens is something gets put in place for good reason, but then it gets picked up by the executive branch for interpretation, it gets picked up by our judicial system for interpretation, and nobody wants to break the law. So it gets interpreted in the most conservative way possible. What that means is we just got to get the bills right. And that's why I really, now that I'm in this world, I want to invite all of you to participate in the process. That's how we get informed and can help get these things right and get these things thoughtfully done, which is the ultimate intent of our legislation. Okay, now I'm going to move to Q&A. I'm going to invite Catherine back up to moderate. By the way, I'm also going to be available for questions as part of this. So any questions you have about the industry, everything we talked about, innovation, the economy, et cetera, we'd love to hear your questions.
Can we have a great round of applause for our panel? I was writing down some keynotes, some of the highlights. I have to go through this because I think there were some really great things that came out from this conversation. Talking about Connecticut as an innovation economy, the challenges of building a business in Connecticut, that a creative and thoughtful environment is where businesses can thrive. Vlad, you simply put how you defined innovation is that it's solving big problems, and that access to capital and seed funding can be difficult, but you had to be creative to find your pathway. But look at you now. Jody talked about having access to people and talent in Connecticut, that we are a one phone call state. I thought that was very interesting that she touched upon, and that there's a village mentality of access and support, and luring companies We have to band together to get them here, and that's how we can grow. She also talked about some of the challenges, about the headwinds on the federal level and making better fiscal laws for companies. And Dr. Green here, new to the Connecticut ecosystem, had some really interesting things to say about location and proximity and clustering and how that is key for growth. So there were some incredible takeaways, as well as a bar in Taiwan, and that's where you can make an unforgettable product. That stuck with me as well.
That's where we're going to hold Made 3 at that bar in Taiwan.
I'm here for it. I will be your MC. I can be your tour guide. I want to get to one of the questions. Michelle, thank you, Michelle, for writing in. Is Michelle here in the room? Michelle, well done. She asked a great question. She says, considering some of the recent activity around international student visas, can you talk about the value international talent brings to the state, how Connecticut is thinking about the issue, and what might be at risk if visas should be denied? I thought that was a really great question. Thank you, Michelle.
Well, I'm happy to make a comment. Look, I'm the son of immigrants who escaped communism and came to this country right for all the opportunity that it holds. And I'm a firm believer that we need to look at talent around the globe, and we want the best and brightest to come here to Connecticut and the United States to advance our technology. And so it's a critical question, and we can't cut off that talent pool coming into the state. So it's...
I couldn't agree more. Maybe I'll just comment, and I said this at the last meeting, but since there's so many new folks here, I'll repeat some of it. You know, we as a country, I think what Vlad just described has been our economic engine for millennia, for generations, which is if you are the best, the brightest, no matter where you're from, no matter what you look like, no matter who you love, you can come here and innovate, and you can come here and you can build. And I think rhetoric matters. When we start to talk about you're not welcome here, or that you're here for the wrong reasons, or start to make it more adversarial, that is how we actually destroy the economic engine, which is the combination of capitalism and democracy. I think it is that fundamental. So we in the state of Connecticut, we're in a wave right now, right? We're in the wave of protectionism and isolationism I talked about. I don't agree with it fundamentally, but that's what we're experiencing right now. And I think it's just very important for us in this state to say that is not reflective of our values. We will defend our values, and you are welcome here. If you are willing to come here and build your family, build your business, and innovate, you are welcome here, and we want you to come here.
I think it's my understanding that Yale and UConn both stopped their international students' visas from being revoked, so for the time being. But, students aren't able to go home. They're afraid to go visit their families. And then if we look at the next generation of talent, the PhD students finishing up now, they're very concerned about the workforce that they're entering. They just finished all these years of schooling. So the one thing I would say is we took on 2 extra interns this summer. So I would urge everyone, if everyone just takes 1 extra intern this summer, we're covering all those internships that have ended too.
The one other point I would add also is, along the same lines, is that, we have to continue to look for talent in areas that we have historically not looked. We talk in terms of inclusive growth, and that's super important because, there are whole swaths of the population that have historically not participated in these sort of new economies. And from a Quantum CT's perspective, we're about demystifying all these fancy terms, quantum this or whatever. You don't have to have a PhD in physics to participate in this new economy. And I think that for us, I know for the other members of the panel here, inclusive growth is critical for us, not only as a state, but as a society, to really accelerate.
I want to open up questions to anybody who's bold enough and daring to ask a question in our audience to our incredible panel.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Magali Cajigas. I'm the Connecticut State Director for the Hispanic Federation. And my question to all of you today, I relate to what the gentleman was just saying, Dr. Green, I believe, in regards to our untapped talent in neighborhoods like mine, the Hill in New Haven, or Waterbury, the Valley, or Hartford, where my office is located. We need assistance to continue enforcing workforce training for those programs, getting the investment so that you can have that in-house talent, that backyard talent, as I like to refer to it. And with the tie-ups with the federal grants and fundings and legislation, we did a week-long, what we called an Encuentro Nacional, where we took 100 organizations to lobby and meet with their congressional leaders. Now, for Connecticut, it was an easy visit because most of our folks were there and welcomed us with open arms. Not good news because of a lot of the pauses on our programs, but with open arms. My Florida, North Carolina state directors, not the same reception. So my question to you all is, what would your companies do to invest in our communities in order to get those folks in your doors?
There are a large number of programs in underserved communities around Connecticut. They're, my understanding, discrete programs, but they're wonderful. And I think there's an emphasis in particular on getting underserved communities interested in careers in life sciences. So we do some joint programming with groups like STEM Femmes, getting females. Medtronic has an incredible program, putting millions of dollars in trying to get underserved communities interested in life sciences, med device careers. So I think you're seeing it on institutional levels. You're seeing it organization by organization. I'm seeing it also, there's funding in different banks that are members of BioCT, making sure they're out in the communities and making sure they're aware of all types of careers. So it's not just science careers and life sciences. There's finance, communications, every type of career. And we're seeing a lot of incredible programming around the state.
I'll just maybe make a quick comment. If I want to say something? Okay, I'll make a quick comment from the state level. Look, we went through a period of economic dislocation, and I'm going back now. As a society, we went through a period of accelerated globalization, and we had a lot of our communities get left behind. That's not just Connecticut, that's the entire country. And the mistake we made, if we look back, the mistake we made is we did not retrain our workforce quickly enough to take advantage of future economic opportunities. We will not make that mistake again. Every program I have at the DCD prioritizes our marginalized communities, our communities that have the greatest need. We cannot replace all of the federal funding. Federal funding in the state of Connecticut is $14 billion. The good news is we're in a great place. We've got a rainy day fund maxed out at $4 billion to get us through an economic recession. But we weren't expecting a federal funds recession. That being said, we need to hear from the community. When funds are getting cut, we need to know about it. The governor's literally set up a tracker where you can go on and put in things that are getting cut. It can't just be the risk of getting cut. I got to say that because everyone's worried right now, and I understand that. But it needs to be things actually getting cut so we can start to make intelligent and thoughtful trade-off decisions about where we can fund, where we can't. But I want to close with this message that what you described matters to us. We understand it, we see it, and we are prioritizing it.
We thank all of you for taking the time today, and everybody in the audience too for listening as well. If you still have questions, we want to encourage you to write them to us on the Made Events group LinkedIn. The conversation is going to continue. Some of the panelists saying that they would answer questions afterwards as well. We love that you were here. We hope you come to the next Made Leadership event. Let's keep the conversation going. We hope you have a fabulous experience for the next 2 days. Thank you so much.